Back in 2010, I got the chance to go fishing off the coast of South Africa, where I saw the biggest shark of my life. Now, I want to stress to you that I've done cage diving before with great white sharks, and it is terrifying, even though it is a thrill. What I saw in the waters this day was larger than any great white shark that I've ever seen. It also looked vastly different. Great white sharks are very distinctive looking. Most of you, assuming you are sharing this with your readers, will know exactly what a great white shark looks like. They look different than a tiger shark or a goblin shark. The shark I saw had a much more narrow face, and if I'm guessing size here, which I'd be pretty good at, I would say it was anywhere between 30 to 40 feet in length. Its overall body, I believe, was more narrow than a great white shark, because a great white has more girth to it. However, great white sharks, unbeknownst to people who don't have experience with them, aren't these crazed bloodseeker man-eaters like Hollywood portrays them. They're not hostile, really. However, the shark we encountered, this single shark that I've never seen before in my life, acted incredibly hostile. It tried to ram into the boat several times and tried to knock some of us overboard out into the water. At least that's what I sensed. I'm just going to say right now that no, I don't believe this was a megalodon, and no, this wasn't a Jaws scenario where it was out to get the ship. I think we had somehow provoked it and angered it, which I just don't understand how. Tiger sharks are also very aggressive sharks and have a very bad temperament. I'm still just trying to figure out how we provoked this particular shark. I have some things to share about this experience and why it's weird. South Africa happens to be a hotbed of shark gatherings because it is also where, during a certain time of year, there's a mass gathering of sea lions and seals. You might want to fact check me real quick for that, because it might just be one or the other. But either way, it's basically a giant dinner bell for a lot of sharks. So what that means is you'll see a huge congregation of sharks coming to this area certain times of year to feed. And because of that, like us, we were lucky to run into a shark that nobody, at least I, hadn't seen before, larger than any great white I'd ever seen or cage dived with. Fortunately, none of us were in the water at the time of this sighting, and the shark only hung around for maybe 15 minutes at most before going and swimming away. None of us tagged it or touched it. It never tried to jump up out of the water and bite us. Nothing Hollywood happened. I'm not going to sit here and feed you some creepypasta sea monster story like you probably want. I'm going to give you reality and facts because it's what you deserve. Anyway, the second detail that I wanted to share with you is that there is speculation that a megalodon is still in existence. And you guessed it, it's speculated to be living right exactly where we were fishing, the South African coast. I don't know if it's necessarily just because of the food source or if it has to do with the climate. It could be a combination of both. There have been whales and other large sea mammals that have washed up with large chunks taken out of them that are far larger than a great white shark. I don't know if we necessarily saw a megalodon that was potentially an adolescent or a juvenile, which is very possible, but I can 100% truthfully say that none of us have ever seen a shark this size that looks quite like this. You might be disappointed to know that it wasn't a 70-foot behemoth of a shark like megalodons are painted to be, but like I said, it is possible this was just an adolescent of a megalodon. You need to remember that the ocean is a vast unexplored territory, and many things could be living and hiding within it. Hell, in the past 20 years alone, with technology ever increasing, we've discovered hundreds, if not thousands of new species that we never thought possible. Even in the last 50 years alone, we've actually been able to discover more and more fish that dwell at the bottom of the ocean, and sea life forms that we never thought would be possible. The possibilities here are endless when it comes to the sea. I think that's why the concept of sea monsters like large sharks, the kraken, giant squid, are just so intriguing because the possibility of them existing is actually very real. We can't fully explore all the depths of the ocean, and when so many nooks and crannies for large fish and creatures to live in and hide out, I don't think we'll ever fully know the truth. The last thing I wanted to tell you is that after the few of us on the boat saw the shark, we had a chance to talk to some of the local fishermen, and they too have seen the same species of shark. They had a specific name for it that they spoke about in their native tongue. One of the fishermen that I talked to said these things are very aggressive, and at one point even capsized his boat with him in it. Either way, it would be a terrifying situation to be having your ship just being capsized with a 30 to 40 foot carnivorous predator swimming beneath you. A lifelong friend of mine who has spent years and years in the Navy had some of the wildest stories to tell me about his time out at sea. Everything you can imagine, from weird lights in the sky to dealing with Somalian pirates, and even more hair-raising things you can imagine. One story that he shared with me, though, always gets under my skin because he knows I'm a sucker for sea monsters. In fact, when I first watched the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, my favorite parts were always when they were dealing with the Kraken, because it was just this monstrous, monolithic creature of the abyss. While he has not seen a creature like that in the ocean per se, he does have a story that is eerily not too far off. I'll preface this and say that I am terrible at reciting the story. I'll have to reach out to him and get him to contact you so he can give you this story in full with every detail. So for now, I'll just give you the basics of the story. While on a larger Navy ship, he didn't go into detail what kind of ship they were, but that they had spotted an extremely long animal swimming about 40 meters below the surface. This thing was so large that you could faintly see it through the water. My friend calls it the largest sea serpent that he's ever seen or heard of in his life, and told me this thing far exceeded the length of the boat, and the width was even larger than that of the boat. It had so much force underneath the water that it moved the ship off course and set them off path from this large moving object. He couldn't give me any estimates of how long or wide this creature was, but told me it was a behemoth of a creature. This makes me believe that there is such a thing as a Leviathan, if we're talking the size he truly told me. He's not a storyteller by any means, and he was dead serious when he was telling me this. Again, this is in the far South Pacific Ocean, the part of the ocean that also happens to be home to some of the deepest parts, with an average depth of around 14,000 feet, if I'm not mistaken. And also, the Mariana Trench sits in this part of the ocean as well. It shouldn't surprise me that something so large dwells in that area of the ocean. The sighting, I was told, was also well documented by that ship, so it's on file somewhere. It even freaked the captain out because he had never seen something so large in all of his days in the Navy. This is a true story that really happened to me back in 2006 when I was living near a beach in Florida, a rather small town in between some bigger beach towns. I had just driven back home to Oklahoma to visit and happened to talk to one of my best friends, Joe, into moving back to Florida with me. One night, Joe and I had decided we were going to head down to the beach, bring a couple of beers and some herb, and chill out down by the ocean. It was a nice night. As we pulled up, I remember parking my car in the beachside parking lot. We were listening to Sublime and opening our first beers when I told Joe I was going to go walk down to the beach. I kicked off my sandals and walked down to the ocean. The ocean was flat, waves barely rolling up against my ankles. As I'm standing there, gazing the open ocean, I hear Joe say something as he started walking down the car towards me on the beach. Then, what I can only describe as an ethereal light, blue lane of light, illuminates me. The light creates a lane, about 15 feet wide. The light illuminated the sand from the ocean to the top of the beach's sand dune. What struck me as odd was that it wasn't a broadcast light in a V shape from the origin. It was a parallel lane of light. It was illuminating the granules of sand in a way I'd never seen light do before. As it lit me up, I exclaimed to Joe, "What is that?" I began to search for the origin of the light. I didn't see nor hear anything in the sky above, so I focused my attention on the ocean. I could somehow sense that this light was coming from near offshore. I squinted to look for any stern lights, assuming that maybe this was coming from a boat. This was a clear night, and in a clear night off the Florida coast, you can see a boat's lights for miles off the coast into the horizon. I saw nothing. No boats, no shadow outlines along the horizon. Nothing. Still, I could sense that this light illuminating me was coming from a few hundred yards off the beach, still unable to physically see the object. This analysis all happened within a matter of probably 30 seconds as the light illuminated me. The light then slowly dissipated off of me. It then lit up Joe's lane for about 10 seconds, who had now descended the top of the beach and was almost closing in on me. Now he's freaking out. Then the light dissipates off of him and illuminated the lane on the other side of me, where there was nothing. Then, the light behaved in a way I will never forget. It did a rapid shuffle of the 3 lanes in a random fashion. It straight up scanned us. The next thing I know, a huge tidal wave is picking me up off the beach. The wave had to have been 20 feet tall. It picked me up off the ground and threw me face first onto the beach like a rag doll. If you've ever skateboarded, I'm sure you've heard the term scorpioned, where you eat it face first, and your legs wrap up over your head from behind you. Worst case scenario kind of ordeal. That's what happened. Not so gnarly. As I got up, I yelled for Joe. I heard him. He had been washed about 30 yards inland. I walked up to him and said, "Dude, are you okay? What the hell was that?" He was quivering and said, "I don't know, man." Just then, I felt this really creepy, spooky sixth sense feeling come over me, like we'd just seen a ghost. He felt it too. It was written all over both of our faces. I said, "Let's get out of here right now." So we jumped back into my car and hauled ass back to the house. As we're sitting on the couch in the living room, trying to recount what had just happened on the couch, we must have been talking very loud. My cousin, who'd been in bed sleeping, comes out and says, "Guys, it's 4:30 in the effing morning. What are you guys out here yelling about? I gotta wake up for work in like an hour." He was pissed. Simultaneously, we both began blurting out what we had seen and sounded like we were absolutely insane retelling of what had just happened. He didn't believe us, of course. He asked if we had taken hard drugs or were drunk. We weren't. We'd only both had 1 beer each. Then, as he goes back to his room to go to sleep, I looked over to my friend Joe and said, "Wait, 4:30? We went out there at like 11 and have only been gone for an hour." We both looked at each other with a frightened, spooked look again. The next day, I woke up and had a burn mark around my right eye socket from where the force of the impact on the beach had literally sandpapered what resembled a road rash on my face. I've told myself many things over the years to try and make sense of it. Government helicopters, submarines, tidal wave warning systems. But deep in my gut, I know that Joe and I will never forget, and coincidentally, also never fully remember the time we were possibly abducted by an unidentified, submerged object. I was 20 years old back then, just a pup. I recovered fast, but the older I got, closer to my 30s, the worse and worse my back showed that I wasn't alright, that the tidal wave that scorpioned me up onto the beach had really messed me up. I have to use a back roller and a back massager daily to do physical rehab on myself from what feels like 3 to 4 completely blown vertebrae. It's literally a daily reminder that whatever happened out there on the beach that night in Florida really did happen.